this is the first podcast of, I don't know what I'm going to call this, but I have Jeff on, Mr. Jeff on YouTube and the social medias. And Jeff lives in my area, Western Pennsylvania, has a YouTube channel and Instagram and Facebook. And I met him at Myco Fest in person. And this is February 25th. The Norfolk train accident in East Palestine, Ohio happened on February 3rd of this year. And Jeff had put out a video explaining some of the chemicals that were spilled out in this train accident. So he made a YouTube video, and I was really interested in talking with him. So welcome, Jeff. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to our conversation.
Man, thank you for bringing me on here. Forgive me, audience, forgive me for the backdrop of my truck I'm in. But hey, I make do with what I can and steal Wi-Fi when I can. So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
but
So I guess like if you could maybe give a little introduction and like some of your background involving with the HazMat, that could help inform the audience.
sure. So, yes, my name is Jeff Reichelt. I go by the moniker Mr. Jeff when I'm doing my social media and stuff. Kind of made a little persona as a mushroom hunter. Fell in love with mushrooms back in like 2015, but really didn't go anywhere with it until life pushed me in this direction to become a forager and learn my land, learn food out of a necessity. Then it turned into a passion. But prior to being a mushroom guy, I'm talking almost, it feels like another lifetime ago. Um, I was a fundamentalist Christian, active in my church, active in my community, got into firefighting, and that branched into hazmat. Really explored the chemistry side of this whole thing with the East Palestine. So I feel like I can give insights both on the chemistry and the mediation of it, or the remediation of it, as well as the forager side of things too. So hopefully I can combine both in our talk today.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. Because I've done some research. I actually drove out to East Palestine a little less than a week ago. Did an interview and just was checking out the place. And we've heard a lot about just like what like normal people should do, but for us foragers and like farmers and gardeners, like we're like really interacting with nature a lot more than most people. Most people interacting with nature, it's like going camping or going for a hike. We're literally eating things from the earth. And so
Right.
whenever, we have like toxic chemical spills or, air pollution, these things are, way more important for us to address than like the average person. So, I think it's cool that you have hazmat training and you're also into foraging and local to this area too. So
Now,
um
granted, I should interject here. Um, I've traveled and I visit Western PA a lot, but I'm actually Central PA
oh
technically.
yeah, were you
I'm
Johnstown?
no, I visit Johnstown. I got friends out there. I could even shout out Blairsville, um, Oak Haven Mushrooms, Diana. That's what I was getting a lot of internship in growing mushrooms out there. So I was going out there a lot last year. But I'm actually rooted in Union County, just west of like State College. For
Yeah.
folks that know about Bucknell University, Lewisburg,
Okay.
that's my home. But I'm still, to me, like when we talk about like the plumage of that, the burn off they did, that was all blowing my direction too. I'm just a few hours west.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
this is still concern to me because of the fact that I consider myself PA's mushroom hunter. Like I'm a mushroom hunter for the people of Pennsylvania,
Right.
both
Yeah.
west, central, east, you name it. So
Yeah,
this is definitely
absolutely.
something that's important to me, even though I may not be as local as you.
Right. Yeah. And I'm 60 miles away from East Palestine, and um I had seen things on the internet about this train accident, and I kind of ignored it and didn't really look into it. And then within the next week, I started to have some respiratory issues. I was coughing a lot, and I thought it was because I heat my house with wood. But like it wasn't even colder, so I wasn't burning more wood. And I started running my HEPA air filter just like intuitively, and I was
Yeah.
drinking mullein tea and like anise hyssop tea, and and then I started to research this some more, and I'm like, wait a second, this is 60 miles away, and like the air plumage like people are concerned about is like 100 miles. So and then people in Pittsburgh were also experiencing that too, and they're also around 60 miles. So um, that was the initial first week whenever there was high particulate matter in the air. But I think it's safe to say, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this too, is that the air quality at this point is pretty much fine. um
Yeah, I
okay.
agree.
Yeah.
Only I agree because, as I mentioned in my video I did about a grain of rice in an Olympic swimming pool would
Hmm.
pale in comparison to putting the pollutants in our atmosphere. I am not in favor of pollution.
Right.
I want to establish that right off the bat because in my video, it almost sounds like I was glad they burned it. I wish it never happened.
Right.
And it can be debated on whether they should have burned it off or come up with other solutions. And since I did the video, reading further and discovering bioremediation methods that they've known about for 25 plus years, I'm kind of upset about the industry and humans as a whole, right? Like
Hmm.
we know, and we're not taking preemptive action to knowing that this stuff happens. Train derailments happen. I don't want to say regularly, but this isn't an isolated instance. So the fact that they decided to burn out of, this would be best, it didn't have to be the best solution. There were better solutions that could have been played out, but the industries aren't going in that direction. So they weren't equipped. If they wanted to use bioremediation using fungi and bacteria under with the science we know, they should have been for, a decade or two planning this out, doing experiments and having it ready. So
Right.
when the disasters happen, we're ready.
Like
No, they
so yeah, we could do like a fast implementation, because from what I understand, they dug a hole and buried the liquid and then lit it on fire and like made it so, because correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe vinyl chloride boils at 8 degrees Fahrenheit. So whenever it's exposed to normal temperatures, it's not
it's a
just
gas.
spilling out, it's actually like spewing out like boiling liquid, because
Yeah,
it's
it's evaporating rapidly. It's turning
right.
into a gas and dissipating. And the reason I actually thought that method with their current abilities, notwithstanding the fact that we know we had bioremediation science that wasn't being utilized, that actually by dissipating it, VCM or vinyl chloride monomers, the actual gaseous form that they were toting around, that actually breaks down very fast, both in the air and in water.
Okay.
When it's when it's exposed to oxygen, it begins transformations into other organic compounds like these organic acids. You may have heard of organic acids such as like formic acid. Acetic acid is vinegar basically.
Hmm.
Formic acid, oxalic acid.
Yeah.
Um, I got cheat sheet below, so I may be looking down occasionally. Okay. Oxyglycolic acid is another common byproduct of VCM degradation. And those organic acids, they further secondary degradation turn into carbon dioxide and water.
Yeah.
Now, both carbon dioxide and water vapor are greenhouse gases.
Right.
So yes, there is an increase in greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, but going back to the Rice Olympic swimming pool analogy, um, this boggles my mind. But 1 cubic mile of atmosphere is in the, oh, I'm gonna botch the number. I don't have it in front of me. we're talking hundreds of millions of tons of actual weight of air compared to the volume that they put into it. And that's just 1 cubic square mile. And over the course of time, it dissipates so thin, so sparsely that it's immeasurable. And it doesn't
Hmm.
take long because we have natural air currents and jet streams moving this air around the planet.
Right.
So it's like taking a really strong concentration of this toxicity and saying we're going to thin it out so much that it's in essence non-toxic anymore across the globe.
Right.
But it's the immediate and the local that's the
Right.
problem.
Right.
I'm thinking, yeah, in the long term and over the broad area, it's going to be okay. But the immediate and the local is where you have to watch out. And you're talking about eating food locally. You're talking about breathing
Right.
that air locally. Immediately, they burned it. So now you're talking about VCM or vinyl chloride, um, burnable byproducts or the burn byproducts. That's no longer, now we're not talking about VCM turning into CO2 and water.
Hmm.
That's what happens when it's just left on its own over time. When you burn it, now you're introducing phosgene, you're introducing what was the other one? Oh, hydrogen chloride gas.
Right. And
Hydrogen chloride
also,
gas,
I believe it can create hydrochloric acid too, I believe.
that's
Whatever.
what happens when hydrogen chloride and phosgene both are introduced to atmospheric water.
Right.
There's
Right.
water
And the
vapor in the air.
phosgene, could you explain to the viewers what phosgene gas was used for?
Wasn't phosgene gas, I might be misspoken, but wasn't that a type of chemical warfare agent
Right.
that they
Right.
would use?
I believe it was used in the trenches,
World War
because it's a
One.
heavy gas. It would get down low.
Yes. Yeah.
So
I,
that's
I
pretty
don't know a
scary.
lot about that. I don't know a lot about the historical use of it, but that's my understanding too. And isn't, I want to say phosgene gas, is phosgene gas a byproduct of meth production too? One of the toxic fumes?
I wouldn't know. I mean, I know it looks like I would know in the background, but funny, just a little funny side note. The people who used to rent this house actually used this room to be a meth lab.
Oh
Um,
man.
so
So I'm pretty sure though when I'm pretty sure in the production of meth, methamphetamine, that phosgene is a byproduct, and that's why they have to use fume hoods or off gas it into the atmosphere because it'll accumulate in a room and could kill you. That's
okay,
why in the show Breaking Bad they're wearing gas masks, not because they're going to inhale meth dust. It's
right.
because of phosgene. I'm pretty sure it's phosgene, not phosphine,
I'm
because I
not
get the
sure,
two
but
confused in my mind sometimes. But either way, yeah, you don't want to be breathing that stuff.
right.
Because it's a neuro, I believe it's a nerve agent or affects the nervous system, I
I'm not
think.
sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure either, so I don't want to overspeak here, but I
Yeah.
can speak on phosgene and hydrogen chloride. Their degradation with water is bad for living things because we have water in us. We
Right.
have our mucosal linings is really where the damage begins. Even in small amounts, you get chemical burn, acid burn from the hydrochloric acid that's formed from the combination of the water with the hydrogen chloride or the water with the phosgene. Phosgene actually has to break down into hydrogen chloride first, I believe, before it turns into hydrochloric acid. So it's got one further step, but same thing, same damage. And that's the acute damage of being in its presence locally, breathing in that air from the burn.
Right.
So that's why there's people probably locally in Ohio and near the border there in Pennsylvania that may have respiratory issues because the formation of hydrochloric acid.
Right. Right.
Our bodies produce hydrochloric acid, but it's kept in a safe spot, our stomach.
Yeah.
Imagine like, and I'm going to sound a little gross here, but imagine, you get acid reflux, you vomit, and you were to accidentally inhale that and that burning feeling you would get in your lungs, you'd be coughing, you'd be gagging, you'd be on fire. Well, they're inadvertently breathing that in and doing that same thing,
Yeah.
introducing it. So
Yeah. And
they
it's
people needed to get out of there.
another name for is muriatic acid. So used as
Yeah,
a cleaning supply.
for
Um,
pools and stuff.
Yeah.
It's for balancing pool pH. It
Yep.
lowers pH. It's an acid, but yes, it can
Right.
etch concrete.
Right.
So
Yeah.
definitely,
It can do some serious removal of schmutz on surfaces. So
yep.
um yeah. So I would you um I'd like to, before we move on to like the other chemicals, I just want to like touch on that kind of the philosophy around it, where it's like we don't we don't want to have these chemicals being used, but like as we know, vinyl chloride is used to make PVC, polyvinyl chloride.
Yeah,
PVC is, you know, all the drain pipes that we
everywhere.
use, it's everywhere. And like we don't want to, like I know in your video you're saying like I think that they handled this the best they could, and now you're saying, you know, with the bioremediation might have been a better choice,
Well,
but
it would be a better choice if they had been pre-planning for a disaster that would happen
right,
eventually.
right,
So they didn't have the bioremediation resources in place.
right.
So that's why I believe the burning would be the best option. But mind you, this is one opinion from one guy.
Well, and
I don't,
I listen, I totally get that. And I feel like it's hard for us to like look at something like, oh, it's a controlled burn. And like my initial thought was like, oh, they're just like, you know, it's the evil corporations trying to like destroy the earth and lower the population. And it's like that may be at play somewhere, but at the same time, it's like if you either do a controlled
I'm getting
burn
comfortable.
or you do like an actual, like I don't know what's going to happen, and it explodes in a way that is way more detrimental. It's like, yeah, we don't want to be in this situation, but given the resources they had, you know, yes, bioremediation would have been better, but I think probably controlled burn might have been the next best solution. I mean, yeah, we don't want these chemicals. Like, I'd
Right.
love to live in a world where we have, you know, bamboo pipes instead of PVC pipes, but that's not the world we live in. And so,
Exactly.
like, you know, how do we, you know, it's not like I'm trying to give Norfolk the benefit of the doubt. It's just like this
No,
is
Norfolk Southern should be held accountable. Um,
absolutely
the industries, that's what I'm saying. The industries know if a guy like me can go on the internet in 5 minutes and find research papers from the 90s that talk about bacterial species that can eat vinyl chloride. No, I'm sorry. They can eat PVC. They can eat
mm-hmm.
polyvinyl chloride. Actually, the actual plastic.
Right.
They can eat it and turn it into safe compounds. This stuff's easily accessible information. The industry should be held accountable.
Absolutely.
The only reason I advocate or think that the burning was good is just because putting it in the air dilutes it quickly. Yes, the locals need to get the hell out of there during the burn. And
Right.
and there's going to be, we'll get into that, dioxins in these hydrocarbons that are produced in the soot and end up on the ground and as a film on things.
Right.
Yeah, we'll get into that. But vinyl chloride, um, here, let me look at my paper again.
Well,
I'm going
while
to
you're
use a
doing that,
bacteria.
I just want to mention too that I was part of this uh, Carnegie Science Center Zoom meeting on Thursday, and there's three doctors on there, and they're scientists. It was kind of vague and safe. You know, they like they can't conclude anything because there's no evidence, but there was some
Right,
information that you know, it's almost like I'd rather have those chemicals in the air dispersing quickly, like you're saying, rather than just sinking into the groundwater. Because from what I understand, vinyl chloride can be it can be oxidized much quicker exposed to heat and sunlight, and it's actually relatively stable in the ground and under, you know, in aquifers,
right.
and that's where
I mean,
like downstream effects along the Ohio River basin, that's where the concern is, like with foraged food, mushrooms, herbs, people that have wells and high aquifers. I think that at this point, the best thing that people can be doing is continually testing their water for these chemicals.
Yeah. And how do I say this? There's gonna be, even though they burned it off, they didn't burn everything, right? Some of it had to end up. I've seen the videos and the photos of like the film on top of water,
Right.
like the slicks, the oil slick looking things, the
Yeah.
rainbow
Plus,
colors and stuff.
they buried it in a hole and it's sinking into the ground while they're doing that.
So really, what they did is they did both. They did the ground exposure and the air exposure instead
Right.
of it just going in the ground. And burning, of course, it wasn't burned the ideal way you want vinyl chloride to be burned. Vinyl chloride in a perfect burn doesn't produce the dioxins and all those other compounds. That's product of incomplete combustion, because it when you just light something on fire, are you reaching its maximum temperature where it's going to do a complete oxidation burn? Not necessarily. Soot shows, the black plume that shows that it wasn't completely burned.
Right.
So there's so much nuance involved. That's why I kind of am being unfair when I say, yeah, it was best that they burned it off. It's
Yeah.
best if it was a complete burn. Complete burn is producing the phosgene and the hydrogen chloride, which turns to the the hydrochloric acid. Hydrochloric acid in nature will dilute itself in water. It'll
Right.
eventually neutralize over time. That would be the perfect scenario, is to allow it to neutralize into less toxicity through natural just dilution in water and air. The dioxins, the long term, the sediments that landed on the plants and on the soil, nature, I do believe, will clean it up. But the immediate, I would say, if you're within that like 60-mile or so range, if you can visibly see or experience the toxicity yourself when you're out foraging, then I would like, to me, I'd be like, that's no good. Not this season. I'm going to
Right.
give it a season.
Right.
Now, when it comes to like, let's go up the food chain. We didn't mention the word biomagnification yet. Do we
Right.
want to
Right.
do we want to dive into that real quick?
Totally. I just want to I just want to like touch on that point you made about the like when to forage, because that's the big unknown in our community. I have people talking to me that live around that area and they're like, should I just like skip this whole season? Like, can I do a garden? I mean, I would say it's safe to say for people in Pennsylvania and people that are upstream, like the Ohio River, the headwaters begin at Pittsburgh from the Monongahela and the Allegheny River. So they're
Right.
going, we are upstream in this area. So I think that anybody upstream from East Palestine, like given a good distance, is probably fine.
Yeah, I
The
would probably
initial,
mentally draw a circle in my mind of maybe like an hour drive.
right,
And maybe that might even be a little too big. You could actually probably be, sorry, stumbling on my words, 10 miles north, for example, of the site,
right, right,
and find that, man, this soil doesn't look messed up. Even though the
right.
air quality was poor for a while,
Yeah,
the ground may be fine. It really
totally.
does. It tracks differently. You notice the plume went west. I'm sorry, the
Right,
plume went east. The plume went over Pittsburgh and Pennsylvania, whereas the ground dissipation is going the way of the river, the way
right,
of Ohio. So it's hitting
right,
Ohio. Those
right.
are the people that need to be worried about foraging
Right, and like the
more.
panhandle of West Virginia and
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, the flow of the Ohio River. And I guess it's like um yeah, that's the hard part. It's like, I wanted to ask you if you knew of anybody. I was thinking maybe contacting Hyphae Labs, or some kind of laboratory, because I don't know if there's a way to. I know we can test water, and I don't know the best resources for that. I don't know if you have like a good lab you would recommend, or
Shoot,
but
I don't.
that's all right.
But
Yeah, I mean, that's like the key missing thing is I think that we need to have continual testing until in like different areas and like compare notes. Like, okay, this person's like 30 minutes away, this person's 40 minutes away, what we're testing is like, the water, or maybe even testing mushrooms or herbs, to see if they're hyper accumulating these compounds, because I was on this Zoom call last night with an herbalist, Ash Ritter, and we were talking about how Paul Stamets talks about like how oyster mushrooms can consume and break down um, uh, petrochemicals into like, basically like carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, and just into their base elements, and that they could even be eaten.
yeah.
But then you look at like, I believe it was Peter McCoy from Radical Mycology. It was like, yeah, you should throw away those mushrooms. Like, don't eat those ones. But like the next batch, like they'll be okay, maybe.
So that's the debate right now. I've been looking at it. It comes down to species.
Yeah,
It
that's what I
it comes
figured too, because like different things are gonna do different things. Like
right.
if they're absorbing or adsorbing, like that's gonna be a different thing. And one thing, yeah, we can talk about biomagnification now, because we're mammals and we eat other mammals,
Yeah, we're
and
up
things,
here.
yeah, the higher you go, but the worse it's going to be magnified, because things store in our fat tissues. So maybe if you knew about like different chemicals that were involved with this,
Oh, I got some goodies for you here.
yeah, let's jump into it.
I didn't mention it in my video. Um, so here I'll cover. I just want to touch on the speciation here, or the difference of species. Certain mushrooms are going to break down those hydrocarbons, the toxic ones, and you won't see them again, and you could eat them. Certain ones are going to sequester. They're going to store. You don't want to eat those. The thing is, mycology is such a budding field. We don't know yet. I mean, certain ones we probably locked in, but I foraged for dozens of species of mushrooms, if not hundreds. I haven't wrote it out. Hundreds of species of fungi that I'm willing to eat, that I know are safe to eat normally, but I don't
Yeah,
have a list of which ones are going to sequester the toxins and which ones break them down into harmless chemicals. That's where it's playing a safety game because of the lack of knowledge. Is, yeah, I'd probably wait a season. I would still be out foraging. Why? Because I've got my reasons. I want to know where the hot spots are. For me, it's a scouting thing
I was
still,
gonna say maybe this year it's all about scouting.
right?
Yeah,
And I also clone wild mushrooms. So for me, I'm going to find a beautiful mushroom that I wanted to start cultivating. I, I may not eat that particular one, but I want its genetics, and then I can get that going on some substrate bags, right? And
right.
get that going. I think by then, I think I've by taking a tissue sample, it's it's kind of the reverse of biomagnification. I'm actually taking a whole mushroom that might have X amount of toxins, and now I'm only taking maybe 1,000%. I'm taking only a little tiny sample out of that tissue and introducing it to agar, and now I'm giving it fresh substrate that's non-toxic. So that eliminates the worry if you're growing your own that way, and we do that here.
Totally.
That's kind of a privilege, though. I know not everybody can just go out and do that kind of stuff. So for those that can't, if you want to play it safe, don't eat certain mushrooms unless you've done your homework and you found that that particular species does break it down. So do your homework. We thankfully we have the resources of the internet. If somebody will take the time, this is what I would recommend on Google or your particular search engine that you'd use. Type in the Latin name. Say we'll use Pleurotus ostreatus. Type that in, and then type in bioremediation, or type in the toxin name next to the mushroom's name, and just see what papers come up.
Right.
that's how I usually go about finding stuff out is you have to put in the right info to get the info you're looking for back. That's all. So,
Right.
where
Yeah.
was I going now? We talked
Well,
about mushrooms,
bioremediation, or I mean, biomagnification.
biomagnification.
Yeah.
So the big concern is probably not so much the plants, but up the food chain. I'd be careful eating animals like
Hmm.
deer
Yeah.
or bear
Yeah. I was gonna say bears, definitely.
because they're pretty much top of the food chain in the woods in
Right.
PA, I think,
Right.
except for us. But that's what I'm saying. The higher you are in the food chain, the more you have to worry. And this is how biomagnification works. I'm not telling you because I'm sure you understand this, but to our audience here,
Yeah.
I use the fish example because in the ocean, say small fish, sardines, by the thousands, all accumulate the little bit of toxins that they're swimming around in. They're eating their little bits of food that they eat, whether it's like plankton or smaller microbial type things that they're feeding off of. They're accumulating a certain percentage in each one of those fish. Now, the next level up the food chain might be a medium sized fish that eats 10 of those sardines a day. So it's getting 10x, it's getting 10 times the toxicity of that one whole fish daily. So it's not even necessarily, well, it is an issue of how high you are on the food chain, but also the age of the fish too. So an
Hmm.
older fish, because these chemicals, they are persistent in nature. They don't necessarily break down. Talking dioxins, talking those PCBs, and there's other ones. I kind of just listed only a couple in my video, but persistent toxins. Now that fish, if it's been eating a diet of 10 sardines a day over the course of 2 years, that's what, 700 and some odd times.
Right.
No, 7,000, I'm sorry, times 10 fish a day. 700 days times 10 fish a day. You're now at 7,000 times the toxic level of the original one sardine. And
Right.
now you go up, maybe you go up to barracuda level. Now you're 3 tiers up.
Yeah.
That barracuda is eating that medium-sized fish. Maybe it's eating 3 of those a day. I don't know how often they eat, right? I'm not a zoologist or whatever, but I'm just showing you the example. You can see how quickly the biomagnification starts moving up in orders of magnitude. We're
Right.
talking tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, because
Right.
that barracuda, maybe it's the diet of a shark that ate that barracuda, plus it ate a bunch of medium fish, it ate small fish, it's eating daily. So you got to avoid eating the sharks,
Right.
avoid eating the barracudas. And when it comes to foraging in the woods of Pennsylvania, avoid the top tier animals
Right. So I'm wondering if
and
because
older animals too.
right, right, yeah, and so deer eat mushrooms, they eat morels, they eat chanterelles, and also they eat plants, obviously. Occasionally they will eat another animal, but usually when they're starving. Um, and so I'm wondering if those are, yeah, deer and bear. I mean, we don't really have much else here. I mean, we got elk up in Elk County, but um coyotes.
Yeah, eat deer, but I would say younger deer. I
Yeah.
know we want to get that big buck,
Right.
but the buck that's been around now, mind you, we're talking about an acute toxicity from one event.
Yeah.
So it's like that's going to affect older deer and younger deer kind of the same. They're all eating the same seasonal foods.
Right.
So this it's probably not fair to judge it by age because if it was like an ongoing toxicity year after year, then
Hmm.
age does play a factor. Age probably
Right.
won't play a factor this time around because everybody's eating the same diet. But
Right.
it does matter. I would avoid carnivores. Not that I don't know of anybody that's eating carnivores other than maybe a black bear. They're omnivores, but
Right.
I would
Yeah.
avoid eating stuff that eats animals.
Right. And again, we want to highlight that, like, this is probably mostly only isolated to that 20-mile, 30-mile, whatever area around East Palestine and downstream along the Ohio River. Like,
True.
it's not like everybody in Pennsylvania needs to not eat deer this year. You know,
Right.
and it's hard because it's like it's easy to get into that fear mindset, and this is really why I wanted to have you on, because you had a great video explaining like the chemistry of things. Like these chemicals will break down easily, like these ones we want to avoid. And because the best antidote to fear is knowledge, and to, you know, face things head on. You know, I mean, we're here in this situation, like, you know, what is the legitimate concerns, what are the irrational, you know, I've seen videos or like charts that people made online where they're saying like, you know, the toxic spread is like, you know, the whole like eastern, you know, seaboard, and like maybe there was like a high particulate matter for like the first week, but I feel like, you know, fear and like, you know, a lot of these things are running people's mindsets. So I really I appreciate, you know, having you on to be like this level headed, you know, like this is legitimately like what we need to be concerned about. And it's been helpful for me to like hear you, and then also hear like the herbalist Ash Ritter yesterday, and even the scientists on the Carnegie Zoom. It was kind of helpful, even though they're pretty vague. But you know, um I think that that was like really good to talk about that biomagnification. I wonder when do you think it will be safe? I know it's all speculative, but like when do you think it will be safe to eat the plants and the animal? Well, maybe yeah, maybe plants and animals are going to be different because the animals are accumulating that in their fat tissues, and that's going to be around longer. But like, do you have any estimate on when it might be safe to eat the plants and fungi around that area?
Animals, well, I would say animals, let them die off, right? They're going to reproduce. They're
Yeah,
not going to pass the toxins along to their offspring
right.
because they're storing it. And if you
Yeah,
do say you do eat animals, I'd trim them.
yeah.
They're storing it in their fats. Excuse me. So I'd be eating the lean portion, so to say.
Eating lean, yeah.
Yeah. For plants, I don't even know if that's going to be a big concern. Because if you think about plants' roots, they uptake nutrients. They're not necessarily trying to just uptake everything. They have mechanisms biologically
Mhm.
that, they can block certain compounds and absorb certain compounds, just like we do. You know how, like, if you consume one thing, it stops the absorption of a mineral. Example, I drink a lot of coffee, so I know that actually blocks iron absorption to some level. Things like
Oh,
that.
okay.
Plants do that too. Fungi have these mechanisms too. So it's kind of hard to predict. We're kind of taking a number one, we're going to take a twofold safe approach, which is just I would avoid eating this season if I lived locally there, all things. I'd
Right.
be I'd be getting my food elsewhere, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It's sad. That stems back to the whole thing that this should have never happened, of course. Nothing we can
Right.
do about it. But if you want to protect yourself, watch what you eat locally there. I would give it the season. Say by fall foraging time, it probably won't be so bad because you think about multiple rainfalls. Things are getting washed out, things are getting diluted.
Right.
Plants are washing themselves out too through respiration and other metabolic processes.
It's almost
Here's
like we're dealing with a moving target here. You know, I mean, it's like there's the spread, but then there's also like the air pollution's going one way, the water pollution's going another way. It's not like if you test it this week, it's going to be the same next week. And I think that as we get water testing and maybe even plant or fungi testing to see if there are these compounds over time, like we're going to feel safer about it. Like especially people that have well water downstream.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
please get your water tested. Do not drink your water right now.
right.
Um,
I agree.
I've even heard too, like the one doctor on the Carnegie Zoom meeting was saying that like charcoal filters are going to be good for your water, but like they may not even get those highly volatile things out, like vinyl chloride, and especially because the charcoal filters, like I have a Berkey, it has to be primed, so it has to be filled with water first, and then you fill it up, and because it creates that capillary action, the suction, and apparently it's like a requirement for it to flow, but it actually makes it less effective than like dry charcoal. So that was just one thing, if you have to drink your water, please get a Berkey filter or some kind of really good charcoal filter.
Man,
Um,
if you could rig up a crude, this kind of sounds silly, and I'm being somewhat facetious, but really, I believe a lot of these chemicals could be filtered with alcohols.
okay. Oh, because it
Ethanol,
would bind to
iso,
it.
it would bind to that, and then you'd have to separate the water from the alcohol through further chemical processes. So it's
Distillation.
kind of silly, but yeah, that's really distillation, distilled water. You'd have to
Right.
distill your water somehow, some way. Don't listen, guys, the audience here. Do not think that boiling your water is going to make it less toxic. It'll make it more toxic.
Right.
Boiling eliminates the water, leaving
Right.
behind things.
And
Boiling is
also
good for
too,
killing germs.
it'll make those heavy metals and other toxins actually more mobile.
Okay.
Have you heard of this? So like if you boil water that's like unsafe, yeah, it'll kill the bacteria, the viruses, and the germs, but it actually makes the water molecules more move faster because it has that heat energy. So the molecules are moving faster, and it actually will
And by
do more
nature, more
damage.
reactive. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it does. It actually makes it more damaging to your body.
Don't
So
boil the water, guys.
yeah, just
I do have some hope.
drink some bottled spring water made out of BPA free plastic.
There you go. I do
So
have some good hope for you guys if you like broccoli.
okay,
Okay. Not local grown broccoli though. not not there
no,
anyway. Not this season. But your cruciferous vegetables, garlic, food that's high in your sulfur compounds.
okay,
Our liver, we're built to detoxify these things. We have a tolerance of so much, right? We can take on certain amount of toxins and we're gonna be okay. We're not trying to live forever on this planet, right? But we're not trying to die tomorrow and we're not trying to suffer with cancers and things like that. I get it. But with a certain level of toxicity in our diets anyway, our liver is equipped to do what's called glucuronidation and sulfonation reactions. That's the metabolic processes of getting rid of these things. Sulfonation requires sulfur. So eating a diet high in your cruciferous is what I recommend. Get your
yeah,
broccoli, get your Brussels sprouts, get those stinky vegetables, right?
right,
Garlic too. That's
right.
going to help. Glucuronidation, I don't know which food's going to have glucuronic acid, but you know what? If you drink Monsters, go look at a can of Monster. I don't advocate for Monster, by the way, but I've read a can of Monster. It contains glucuronic acid,
Wow.
it, which is a liver detox. It's a precursor to help the liver detoxify certain compounds. What they do, sulfonation and glucuronidation attaches a glucuronate, if I'm saying that right, which is a glucuronic acid ester, I guess, binds to the toxicity. It turns it from fat soluble to water soluble, allowing you to piss it out.
Okay.
Same with the sulfonation. You attach that sulfonate to it, it's gonna urinate out. That's how our bodies detoxify things, and we piss them out is by converting them from fat soluble to water soluble through the liver enzymes.
Right.
That's why, once again, get a good broad spectrum of veggies in your diet.
Yeah.
And at this point, heavy on the broccoli, heavy on the sulfur.
Yeah. Well,
Don't
I'm
go
glad
and
that
get, don't
I'm
lick a
glad you,
sulfur block.
yeah, I'm glad you brought this up because this was just talking about like how people can, if they are affected by these toxins, what they can do um, to change their diet to help flush these out. And this talk last night with the herbalist Ash Ritter, I took some notes, and essentially it's like we want to be flushing things out, but at the same time remineralizing. Um, and so she was talking about liver rebuilding, so using things like burdock or yellow dock, things that are bitters, that are going to help stimulate bile.
Thank
Um,
you. I was gonna say I don't know the herbs like they would, like she would,
yeah,
but yeah,
yeah,
you want to bolster your bile salts or your bile as a whole. You want to
yeah.
have the right minerals in there so your bile can do so it can do its job.
Right, which is, from what I understand, which is process your fat, like getting rid of fat, right? Or is
And
that no? That's
and
the gallbladder. Yeah,
well, another thing is physical movement,
yeah,
being active. So don't stop foraging, even if even if you're not going to eat it, get out in the woods and move your body because
totally.
exercise, sweating, getting the blood flowing and burning that fat is going
Right,
to allow the body to help process things that are stored in the fat, get it into the bloodstream. And once in the
totally.
bloodstream, it goes through the liver and then it can get detoxified.
Right,
So
and that and
be
that
active, guys.
movement too is going to help move your lymph fluid, which is
Thank
going to
you.
improve your immune system. And
A lot of people don't realize that we have two circulatory systems. We got the blood, but that has a pump, the heart.
right,
The lymphatic system is pumpless. It
right,
requires us to move. It
right,
requires the squishing of those lymph lines through activity of squeezing the muscles and getting our body moving around. Definitely.
yeah,
Impact
jumping on
in jumping.
trampolines.
Jumping, right.
Yeah,
Yup.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I was like, the three things I took away from her talk last night was liver rebuilding, moving lymph, and moving fat, and they're all, interwoven. But the one the one thing about the moving the lymph was eating things like cleavers, which are, a spring and summer forage, pokeweed, in small amounts, I believe, is fine. Dry brushing, so like dry brushing your skin, moving the lymph through that way. um getting
Massage.
getting
Yeah.
massage, exactly, I was about
Right.
to say that. Dance, yoga, exercise, I mean, I think it's like, let's not let this situation disable us from our connection with nature, right? Like, whether we eat something or not, like, yeah, it sucks. It's like kind of a, we live in the winter for like, 4 months, 6 months out of the year. And the spring forage is like the best. Like, everything's so fresh and young and like just full of abundance and energy. And it's a real bummer. I feel really bad for people who live downstream of the Ohio River from East Palestine, but don't let it stop you from getting out in nature. Even if you're just scouting and you take this year to find new spots, because a lot of us, like, let's be honest, we got our regulars, and maybe we
Yeah.
could branch out a little bit and go to a new spot, and that'd probably be better for everything anyway, right?
Agreed.
So yeah.
Man, I
So
appreciate the fact that we went this route in the discussion because that's to me that's the silver lining right now. There's still hope. We don't have to be in disparage over this. We can move forward. Granted, there is a fallout area that you need to avoid. We're
right,
not denying that.
right,
That town and the vicinity, definitely watch out. Um, and the drinking water downstream too. But thankfully, through the precipitation, rain, it's going to help filter out the ground soil, the fungi. They're going to do their magic in there too. There is hope.
yeah,
And I do
absolutely,
feel bad for the immediate people that had to get evacuated that suffered the initial acute, you know, the lung damage, the breathing, the headaches, all the toxicity that they got initially. There's gonna be ramifications 5, 10 years from now. I can see it now. You know, the ads on the TV or whatever, if we're even watching TV in 10 years. But I could see it now. Do you have lung damage from the East Palestine train disaster? Call 1-800 blah 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 law offices. You know,
right,
there's always somebody going to try to make a buck off this, and ultimately people are going to probably get cancer. There's going to be people
yeah,
who are going to suffer metabolic syndrome, different things, processes we don't even know yet.
right,
That that's unfortunate. I wish the best for those families. and the people that are suffering. Obviously, nature has suffered. Animals they're finding what, tens of thousands of dead animals. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's the dark side of this whole thing. But the future can be bright. We got to be smart about it, and we got to remain hopeful. That's my take on it. I didn't want to be a fear monger in this whole thing, but I do want people to be safe, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. I like, going back to like the initial, part of our conversation. It's like we want to be able to face things head on and be honest and accurate and not fear monger. But like face the reality of what's going on. Like we need to be citizen scientists. We need to be citizen podcasters, our own media stations. Like that's why I felt compelled to just drive out to East Palestine and like see what the heck was going on there. And I appreciate your YouTube video that you were making about the chemicals. It put my mind at ease a little bit because I could actually like say like, okay, well, this one it's going to be breaking down. This one you got to avoid. How do we avoid it? The biomagnification, like, okay, let's avoid the higher up on the food chain animals, and maybe if you're downstream from East Palestine, just skip season, skip eating the foraged items this season. But two, if you are foraging or if you want to walk around and find new spots, if we can find a lab that can test actual plants or fungi, it would be so cool for people to actually be going out in the field this spring and bringing samples to labs and saying like, here's the location, what's the accumulation of compounds, and it will be enlightening for us because we're going to see firsthand where it is, how it's spreading, and how intense it is. But we can't let situations like this um, deter us from doing what we do, which is being connected with nature. I mean, we are nature, so we need to keep doing that.
Hey, I want to speak on a couple things. This is kind of me crying out, shouting out to science and industry. Um, hey guys out there, somebody come up with a reagent test, like a piece of litmus paper for acid. Why can't
Yeah,
we come up with something that we can take in the field? It's just, it would be relatively cheap where someone could buy a kit as a forager and they can test a sample, whether it's like a mushroom fruit body, they could rip open, put it against the moisture of it. And if it reacts color, okay, that shows that it has a certain level of whatever compounds the reagent's testing for. We're not in a perfect world. I'm throwing the idea out there. I'm not even saying it's completely possible. But if
that's
we're
a
not
great
talking
idea.
about it, people aren't going to investigate that. And this is what I took a note on about. I seen this, so it's not my original idea, but it needs to get explored further, science out here. Listen, guys, this is a paper talking about 25 years ago. I'm going to mention Klebsiella. This is a strain of bacteria that was found in an insect larva that was munching on PVC.
Wow.
The larva was getting no nutrition off of it, but why was it compelled to eat the PVC? Because of its gut flora. Its gut flora was probably telling it, hey, we can eat this stuff. And it was digesting PVC. Not like it wasn't eating hard plastic pipes, right? It
Yeah.
was eating PVC film, but it could
Right.
digest the PVC film and break it down into safer components because of this Klebsiella. And there was a couple of other bacteria listed. Why not have, and this could go along with fungi, imagine your booms. I'm not making this up because I've seen it done, but a boom like you would float on top of water to stop oil slicks from spreading,
Right.
that is already spawned
Yep.
with fungi or
With like oyster
bacteria.
mushrooms or yeah.
Yeah, and imagine you've got the booms that are particularly spawned out with the species you need for the chemical at hand. And here's another little bonus. VCM, your vinyl chloride monomers that they were toting in those tanks, when they're exposed to air, they do break down. Imagine if the industry got ahead of themselves and actually put installed into these tankers, like a side miniature tank that would disperse added oxygen to allow its conversion back into nature, into those organic acids and into CO2 and water when a damage or when a train derailment or some kind of explosion occurs, that it's already remediating itself by the disaster happening. So
Right.
here's why. According to the science behind it, 1 pound of vinyl chloride needs 1.3 pounds of oxygen to ultimately convert back to CO2 and water.
Wow.
And and I imagine that doesn't CO2 and water do not have chlorine. So I imagine the chlorine of the vinyl chloride molecule, the chlorine atom is probably going to be reactive and attached to other things. So that's where I can't predict what else is going to happen with that chlorine. But I
Right.
do know that bacteria, they found that bacteria contain enzymes that can take care of these chlorine compounds, whether it's VCM or some of the other chlorinated hydrocarbons.
Right.
I can't remember the name of all of these enzymes. They end with ace, right? Like
Yeah.
oxygenase, halogenase. There you go. They have these
Okay.
halogenases
Yeah.
that they can actually break down halogenated hydrocarbons, chlorine, fluorine, bromine, iodine, some of those guys. And
Okay.
those are some nasty compounds. Just imagine a tanker that has installed maybe externally on the side of the tank or internally there's a supply of oxygen just waiting, and there's also a batch of bacteria just waiting. this is this is purely science fiction on my part, right?
I'm
I'm not
almost
saying
seeing
it
it
would even
like I'm
work.
imagining like like a fish tank with the air pump to oxygenate the water. You know how
Oh, I'm
fish.
imagining it separate though, like it's contained until the disaster happens, and then
Yeah.
at that point it releases it in the presence of the VC, allowing these reactions to take place, so you don't have to do the burn.
Right.
The
Right.
mediation, the remediation would start to begin right on the spot.
Totally. I mean, and there's also like, I mean, from what I understand, they dug a hole beside the train track and buried it and did this controlled burn. I might be wrong about that, but I'm imagining like if you have the time to rent or send over an excavator to dig a giant hole, how much more time would it take to put a liner in there and contain it so it doesn't go in the groundwater? And then you
Yeah,
have this, I like your idea with the oxygenation, but like even if you didn't have that, like why couldn't you put it in a liner and then slow like have it treated with the bacteria that would eat it, the PVCs. I mean, I'm just trying to think like,
exactly.
you
No,
know,
you're
is
right. These are the ideas here. And now my idea, I can hear somebody now, a firefighter saying, you can't put oxygen in with that. And that's just a added explosion. Yes, it is. But you know what? It would have made for a more complete burn, because more high oxygen rich environment during the burn means less soot, which
right,
means less dioxins, less
right,
PCBs and all these other garbages. It's going to burn cleaner.
right,
It wouldn't be nothing's perfect, and
right,
we're human beings talking about human mistakes,
right,
and that's where we can't perfect what we've already imperfected, which is this human civilization. Now I'm going philosophical with you, but my philosophy is humans have messed this thing up. We're not able to reel it back, but going forward we gotta find better solutions. And I do dream of a day. It wouldn't be in my lifetime, I don't imagine, but I dream of a day in our children's lifetimes where there's a return back to um like a permaculture industry. We can have functioning houses and vehicles and the modern trappings of society done in a way that it returns to nature safely. But we are so committed, both monetarily and societally, because we all live in these boxes and drive these boxes. We're committed. So we would have to have a full paradigm shift and kind of a scrapping. to use the analogy, we need a new heaven and a new earth. It's like
Yeah,
the old Earth's going to have to pass away. I don't mean literally destroy this planet to allow a new one to come in, but it's a change of consciousness that we're going to need. Human
absolutely.
beings are going to have to return to what we came from. We forgot. We're lost. Nature isn't lost. We're the ones that lost our way. If we can, as a collective, find our way back, we can move forward and still function as a society. I mean, we are as human beings, we are societal, we're a hive. We aren't meant to be independent solo beings.
Right,
That should be our driving force to know that we can make this happen because of our collective power.
right.
Instead,
Absolutely.
we used our collective power to trash this planet, all for the sake of somebody making a buck. So yeah, that's my little soapbox there on how I
Yeah.
feel about things.
Yeah,
Sorry.
thank you. Thank you, Jeff. That was great. And I mean, I think that's probably a good place to end it too, because it's been a little bit over an hour, and I know you got to get back to work, but um, yeah, I really appreciate your grounded, realistic perspective. Um, I think that I think that a lot of us would benefit from having perspectives like this. So I just appreciate you taking the time to do the podcast and to share your knowledge, from your experience working with, hazardous materials. And yeah, so I guess,
Man, thank you for having me. I
yeah,
I'm I feel honored to be a part of something that's starting off. This is number one, and you
you're the
picked
first
me.
podcast guest. I don't even know what I'm calling this yet. I'm just like, I got to talk to this guy and I want to talk to more people about everything. So I got a boom mic. I'm committed now. I just
Nice.
ordered my Zoom prescription, so or subscription. So yeah, and it's just I want to talk about everything related to farming, foraging, spirituality, human empowerment, sovereignty, different things like that. So
And
I'll
we actually kind of sprinkled in a lot of those different topics all on one thing. This whole East
absolutely.
Palestine thing.
I
This was
mean,
a
it it
beautiful talk.
it brings up so much, because it's like it's our connection to nature. It's our like, how do we still express our humanness and our desire to literally eat from the land. I mean, this is a very intimate thing. Like we pick things from the soil and consume them, and they become part of us. And
Hmm.
like, so in a lot of ways, it's like this is affecting our freedom to do what we love. And so it's so important for us to like have a real grounded perspective on that. So I'm really grateful for you for sharing, your experience and your knowledge. Um, do you have any like closing thoughts or words that you want to share with people?
I not pertaining. I feel like I said my piece about what we talked about. I have
Yeah,
a shameless plug. I know
yeah. I
you
wanted
mentioned
to
me in the
actually,
beginning.
yeah, if you want to tell people where to find you on all the social medias, and I'll actually post those in the description too. But go ahead and share.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can find me under the moniker Mr. Jeff. Here, let me give a close up of my hat. I don't know if you can see
You
it.
gotta.
But I actually spell out the word Mr. And that's what people get wrong. They type in MR period. No, you got to spell out the word Mr. Like
Okay.
somebody who's out there misting things.
Whoops. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
Mr. Jeff. Mr. Jeff on YouTube. I am a fledgling YouTuber who's out there having fun with it. I'm just being me. I I'm all things mushrooms, but I'm even beyond mushrooms. So you'll see me doing stupid music. You see me driving around philosophizing, but I like to talk about growing mushrooms, foraging mushrooms. That I like to dive into the chemistry. I've got videos talking about, betulin, a compound found in birch polypore. I get
Hmm.
into some obscure topics, if you will. So it's definitely not your run of the mill mushroom channel, but I'm
Cool.
looking to grow my channel. And if you want to go on there and subscribe and check out my videos, much appreciated, much love. And I'm
Awesome.
also on Facebook where I do a lot of interacting with the fans and the followers on Facebook, and I post my pictures and my journey on Instagram. Instagram is at OHMISTERJEFF. So it says Oh Mr. Jeff for
Awesome.
Instagram. Facebook is just Mr. Jeff, and YouTube as well. I appreciate you, Michael. Thank you for having me on. Is there anything else you want to throw at me going forward here?
I feel pretty complete. This is a great conversation. I just really look forward to sharing this with people, and I'll probably I might even upload it tomorrow. So
Nice.
because this is just such a pertinent thing right now in the culture. So yeah, thanks again, Jeff.
We're gonna do this again, and
Yeah,
hopefully, when I come out to Johnstown, Blairsville, and the Pittsburgh area, I can journey up toward you, and maybe we can actually go on a foraging hunt.
that would be
Do a
so
live
cool.
video. That I would love to do something like that with you.
I would
Hey,
love that.
if we don't meet up sooner, I know I'll probably see you at Myco Fest.
Yep. Yeah, I'll probably be vending. I might be speaking about Amanita muscaria too. So
Oh,
that might
nice.
be I might be doing that. So yeah,
That'd be great.
if not soon, we'll definitely see each other at Myco Fest. But yeah, thanks for coming on, Jeff, and I'll talk to you
And
shroom.
thank you as well.
All right,
Appreciate you. Peace.
peace.